wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say, you know.
Again, I wouldn't say I knew what his intention was.
Intention doesn't matter for manslaughter. I don't know what he's going for here.
Is involuntary manslaughter an intentional homicide?
No, ma'am. Not to my recollection of the Metro State statute.
Ooh, kind of destroying the defense here. Day one of the Alec Baldwin Rust movie shooting trial was intense. We got opening statements and witness testimony from officers who arrived on the scene. All the state has to show here is that Alec took this person's life by being negligent, reckless, and not following the rules. So whether or not Alec intended to kill this person doesn't matter. It was an accident. We all know that. His defense lawyer struggles. You'll see it later in this video. Hit subscribe. Here we go. So there's Alec entering the courtroom today for opening statements.
The lawyers will argue the case, and then you will retire to the jury room to arrive at a verdict. It is my duty to decide what evidence you may consider. Your job is to find and determine the facts in this case, which you must do solely upon the evidence received here in court.
So here's Alec's brother right here and his wife. All right, here we go. Now it's the state's opening statements.
When someone plays make-believe with a real gun in a real-life workplace, and while playing make-believe with that gun violates the cardinal rules of firearm safety, people's lives are endangered, and someone could be killed. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this case is about. It's simple, straightforward. The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin. You will hear over the course of the next few days that in the fall of 2021, a movie called Rust began filming at the Bonanza Creek Ranch just south of Santa Fe. You will learn that this movie was a Western with a lot of gun action. And while it was a movie set, it was a real-life workplace for many people. But you will hear this workplace was on a tight budget. That some of the people who were hired to work at this workplace were very inexperienced. And one of those was the armorer, a very young woman named Hannah Gutierrez Reed.
Hannah was sentenced to 18 months.
Ms. Gutierrez's inexperience was obvious. You will also learn that this workplace has some talented people. And one of those was the director of photography, a vibrant 42-year-old rising star named Helena Hutchins. You will also learn that the director of this film was Joel Souza, another talented individual. The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that like in many workplaces, there are people who act in a reckless manner and place other individuals in danger and act without due regard for the safety of others. That, you will hear, was the defendant, Alexander Baldwin. But the defendant did not arrive on set to begin working until about October 13th. And you will learn that prior to arriving on the set to work, he requested to be assigned the biggest gun available. So he was assigned this revolver, a replica of an 1873 single-action revolver. Mr. Neal will tell you that when EMF received this firearm in 2017, it was in perfect working order. The defendant was supposed to have a training session with this gun and this young armorer. But you will see that during this training session, the defendant had somebody or a couple of people filming him while he's running around shooting this gun. You will learn, ladies and gentlemen, or you'll hear during this trial the use of the words prop gun. And you'll learn a prop gun is this real gun. It's not a toy. It's not made of rubber. It's a real gun. You will also see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that during the days before that fateful October 21st day, the defendant handled this firearm multiple occasions. You will see video footage of the defendant firing this firearm, working perfectly fine. But you'll see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that each time the defendant handled this firearm, he did not do a safety check with that inexperienced armorer.
She's doing a pretty good job so far, hammering it home that this was a real weapon, not a prop gun, and there was a lot of safety issues on set.
You'll hear that the reason he didn't do a safety check is because he didn't want to offend her. You will see him using this gun as a pointer, to point at people, to point at things. You will see him cock the hammer when he's not supposed to cock the hammer. You will see him put his finger on the trigger when his finger's not supposed to be on the trigger.
A lot of terrible trigger discipline as well on video.
About numerous breaches of firearm safety with this defendant and this use of this firearm. And the evidence will show that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, the camera crew walked off set. And you will learn that one of the reasons that camera crew walked out is because they were concerned over safety breaches with the use of firearms. The evidence will show that the morning of October 21st started out a couple of hours behind. They filmed some scenes at this church on the Bonanza Creek Ranch, and you will see that one of those scenes required the defendant to pull out his gun. This was in the morning. And you'll hear the director tell him, pull it out and hold it. And the first time, you'll see evidence the defendant does what the director tells him. But you will hear the director tell you many times the defendant would do his own thing. So then the director in the morning asked him, okay, do it again, just like you did now. The defendant pulls out the gun, but this time he cocks the hammer. And around 1:30 or so, they came back to this church to do what's called a block.
It's like a rehearsal.
Working out the details of the moves of the actor. You will hear from one of the witnesses who walked into the church and saw the defendant kind of playing with his gun. Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were talking to the defendant about doing this insert. And the insert was just supposed to be from here, and it was supposed to be of the defendant just slowly taking his gun out of his holster, and just holding it at an angle. Someone asked the armorer to bring the defendant's gun to him. She brought it into the church, showed it to David Halls, who you will learn was the first assistant director. Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun, but then you will hear that Ms. Gutierrez was given the gun back, and she took it and loaded it with dummy rounds. They look like real rounds, but they are very easy to tell. Ms. Gutierrez then went back to the church, showed the revolver to the first assistant director very fast. They only checked about 3 rounds, and they missed 1 round. You will learn that one of the rounds in that revolver was a real round. And the evidence will show that Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. And what you will learn is that once again, the defendant failed to do a gun check or a safety check with this armor. So he takes the firearm, puts it in his holster, but the defendant again did his own thing. Mr. Jorgensen will tell you that he's been involved in drafting and revising movie set safety rules. You will learn that these movie set safety rules require actors, like the defendant, to treat every firearm as though it's loaded, to never point the firearm at another person, and to never put your finger on the trigger unless you're prepared to shoot or to destroy whatever's in front of you.
Basic human gun rules. I mean, even on a set as an actor, I can't imagine putting my full trust into a person handing me a gun and pointing it at someone and pulling the trigger. He says he didn't pull the trigger, but that's a fucking lie in my opinion. But we're not gonna talk about that.
The defendant once again violated those set safety rules. The director had instructed him to just slowly take out that gun and just hold it at an angle. But you will see that the defendant takes it out quickly the first time, points it. And you will hear witness testimony who will tell you the first time he does it, his finger is on or around the trigger. He does it again, takes it out very fast, points it. And once again, you will hear testimony that his finger was on or around the trigger. And the evidence will show that that third and fatal time, he takes it out once again, cocks the hammer, points it straight at Ms. Hutchins, and fires that gun, sending that live bullet right into Ms. Hutchins' body. You will learn that this bullet was a .45 caliber round that entered Ms. Hutchins' body right underneath her right underarm. It perforated her right lung. It traveled through her spine, lacerating her spinal cord, and then it exited on the left side of her back. That bullet then went into Joel Souza's right shoulder, and it came to rest in his back, from where doctors removed it once he was transported. But the damage from that bullet was too much. Ms. Hutchins succumbed to her injuries and bled to death. The defendant began to claim he didn't pull the trigger. The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that's not possible. That gun will not discharge without a pull of the trigger.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he may think he didn't pull the trigger, but his trigger discipline just didn't realize he even did it.
You will hear from firearms experts who will tell you that gun will not discharge without a pull of that trigger. We're sent to the FBI for analysis. The gun first went to the DNA section of the lab, where a DNA analyst found the defendant's DNA on this gun, and then the gun was transferred to the firearms and tool mark section of the lab, where a firearms examiner examined this gun very carefully and closely. He tried and he checked the hammer in the 3 different positions, cocking positions. He checked the quarter cock position, half cock position, and when he held it in the full cock position, you will hear that hammer held until he pulled the trigger. You will also hear that Mr. Ziegler test fired this gun 12 different times, and each time that gun fired as it was designed. And he will tell you that not once did this gun malfunction or discharge on its own. He obtained authorization to do this test, and you will hear that he left that test for last because that test could potentially damage the gun. Mr. Ziegler went forward after he received this authorization and conducted the accidental discharge test. And you will hear, ladies and gentlemen, that during that test, a couple of the internal components of this firearm damaged. You will hear that the trigger sear and the full cock hammer notch were damaged during the accidental discharge testing.
The defense tried to get this whole shit dismissed because the weapon was destroyed in testing.
The evidence will show, however, that before this accidental discharge testing by the FBI, this gun functioned and worked perfectly fine.
Alec does not have a poker face, bro.
Evidence that the defendant himself admitted in December of 2021 that this gun didn't have any mechanical problems. They will tell you that the damage to the full cock trigger notch is consistent with the accidental discharge testing that was conducted by the FBI. The fatal and one of the main problems that afternoon of October 21st was that the defendant didn't do a gun safety check with that inexperienced armorer. He pointed the gun at another human being, cocked the hammer, and pulled that trigger in reckless disregard for Ms. Hutchins' safety. And you will be convinced that the only true and just verdict in this case, so that true justice can be served, is a verdict of guilty to involuntary manslaughter.
Pretty solid. Nice and concise. It was about 25 minutes or so. All right, now defense opening statements, Mr. Spyro.
This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. He was an actor acting, playing the role of Harlan Russ. An actor playing a character can act in ways that are lethal, that just aren't lethal on a movie set. These cardinal rules, they're not cardinal rules on a movie set. And I don't have to tell you much more about this because you've all seen gunfights in movies. It's because safety is ensured before the actor. On this movie set, there were people responsible for ensuring the safety of the set and the firearm. Those people failed in their duties, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. The most critical issue in this case is how a real bullet got on a movie set. The evidence will show that real bullets are never supposed to be on movie sets. Movie sets use dummies and blanks.
What an error from the armorer, dude. Like, how was a real bullet mixed in with blanks?
Use dummies, fake inert bullets that look like real bullets, they don't go bang, for when you want a close-up of the gun. You can't tell them apart from live bullets by looking at them, which is why live bullets can be nowhere near a movie set. And if the director wants a shot of the gun going, bang, poof, there's blanks. that they can use, and those blanks look nothing like real bullets, are used for those shooting scenes. And they'll play these videos that they described of Alec's firearm in the movie going bang poof, and people are conditioned to seeing people firing weapons and thinking that's a dangerous act, that's a dangerous act. And they will play those videos and give you that image to try to tarnish him in your eyes. But that's not what happened here. On this set, there was a real bullet, something that should never be on a movie set, something which has nothing to do with making a movie. And you will hear no evidence, not one word, that Alec Baldwin had anything to do with that real bullet being brought onto that set. The second critical issue in this case is, why did a real bullet get loaded into a prop movie gun? It is undisputed that the bullet was loaded into the gun by the armorer, the person on set whose responsibility it was to ensure the gun was safe. And so picture that moment of the armorer placing a live bullet into that firearm. You hear the prosecutor say, he did this, or he performed in a certain way, he picked out the biggest gun as his prop.
Yeah, I didn't understand that part from the state. Like, why does it matter if you picked out the biggest gun? It's a movie. Movies are supposed to be dramatic and exaggerated. Like, guns can be huge in movies.
It's to tarnish him in your eyes. You will hear no evidence whatsoever that anything Mr. Baldwin did, that something he did in that moment, that horrible moment when she put that bullet in that gun, none of it had anything to do with Alec Baldwin. The first assistant director's job, the head of safety, Dave Halls, checks it before it goes to the actor. And he will tell you he made a tragic mistake. He failed to detect a live bullet. And Alec Baldwin had nothing to do with that either. So all this evidence that the prosecutor just outlined, all of it, has nothing to do with these critical issues, which leads us to this. The evidence will show that on a movie set, safety has to occur before the gun is placed in the actor's hands. In this case, this unique case on a movie set, the prop gun was placed in Mr. Baldwin's hands and cold gun was announced, meaning it had been checked and double-checked by those responsible to ensure the gun was safe. It was just a prop. They all thought it was just a prop and could do no harm. The actor's job is to act, to rehearse, to choreograph his moves, to memorize his lines. He's Harlan Rust. He's an outlaw running for his life, who in the incident in question, he's pulling a six-shooter to try to defend himself. That's why the gun has to be safe before it gets into the actor's hands.
I forgot that cold gun was called out loud. In Alec's mind, he thought the gun was cold. It wasn't a fucking hot gun with a live round in it.
His mind is somewhere else, in the being of another, a century away, an outlaw. He must be able to take that weapon and use it as the person he's acting would, to wave it, to point it, to pull the trigger like actors do, in ways that would be lethal in the real world, but are not lethal on a movie set. And I'm going to show you that scene now.
I'm gonna go find some help.
I don't need no damn help.
You gonna top it down?
He's wounded on the run.
Harlan Rust, if you just stand up nice and slow, did you get up nice and slow, toss the weapons you have.
So whip it out. Okay, well, let me get this all greased. Ready? Okay, ready? Okay, ready?
And set. Ready, and action. Harlan Rust. Do one more just like that. You got one more? Yeah.
Ready?
They want him to do it again. There's no danger. They want him to do it again.
Harlan Rust.
Not the best draw you've ever seen, huh? Look at her face.
Formed by thousands of actors. And the scene that continues after lunch is the same scene. It's just not unfortunately captured on videotape. And the scene they envisioned and acted out, that prop gun was positioned in the afternoon so close to the camera that you could see inside, that you could feel it. You could feel that it was loaded, and it was loaded, of course, with dummies. Dummies to make it look like a real gun. But this one time, one of those dummies was a real bullet. The real bullet was not known to anyone in that church, amongst the actors, directors, and crew in the scene. How they go about their business every day on a movie, not as if some lethal element had been included in the environment. You will see creativity and movement and everyone talking and vibrant. No one had any idea that this venomous, toxic element had been inserted into this magic they were creating. It entered that place. It killed an amazing person, it wounded another, and it changed lives forever. And so to find out what happened on that movie set, you need to do something that the prosecutors could never do. You have to step back and remember what they were doing on a movie set. What were Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, Joel Souza, the director, and Alec Baldwin, the actor, doing on Bonanza Creek Ranch? Movies and magic have always been closely associated. The first people that made movies were magicians. And this imagination that happens in movies, King Kong, he can stand above a city, and Superman can fly, horses and snakes and gun battles. For this to all work, for cinematography, what Helena did to work, for acting to work, you have to be so close to the barrier of real and imagined that the viewer feels that they're there, that it's real. The viewer can't see strings from the stuntman. The stuntman must leap. The snake must hiss. And guns happen in movies all over this country for many decades. Bang, bang. Guns have been an element of theater, and film, and television since the earliest of times. Depictions of war and combat, Spartacus, it stirs audiences because it feels real.
So the judge ruled they have to approach the bench on every objection, and they just objected in opening statements about, I think, started bringing up other stuff. Maybe they don't want that.
Safety being important has the first assistant director, whose name is Dave Halls, above the armor and sort of the safety of the set. And on that day in question, the cast and the creative directors and crew in the church, their actors are not in their normal clothes, it's costumes. There's debris falling from the ceiling, it's fake debris, and they yell out cold gun. And that is an important term you're going to learn in this case. It means that the gun is cold. Cold gun doesn't mean no live bullets. There are for sure 100% no live bullets on movie sets. That's unimaginable. Cold means you don't even have the fake blank poof in it. You don't need to worry even about eye gear or earplugs for that fake bang. It means it's empty, inert, cosmetic, can do no harm. Cold guns can't hurt people. Impossible. Literally impossible for a cold gun to hurt somebody. You could hurt you more by dropping it on your foot. And that's why these artists are carrying on in their art. Cold gun, all clear to go. And the armorer on the set hands a prop gun to Alec, like she had done times before, like people have done with him in movies for a generation. And he's there. He's in the movie set church with his movie set gear and his holster, and he takes his movie set gun. And he's deeply focused in that moment on his character. The artists, the crew members, they're moving around him. Again, no eye gear or earplugs, nothing to protect against. They carry on, they practice, they rehearse, they take a lunch break. Some folks leave, some don't. They continue the scene. Dave Halls, the head of safety, is actually practicing the movement so they can frame the footage that will happen after lunch. And the prop cold gun comes back. The prop cold gun comes back. Cold gun. They call it again. Same gun, again, safe. The first assistant director, Dave Halls, head of safety for the entire film, a man with decades of experience, comes and takes the additional step and inspects the gun. Verifies again. Cold gun. Everyone relax. Go back to focus on the making of a movie. There's nothing in the gun that can hurt anybody. And Alex sits on that pew. And the creative directors, the crew, they're moving around him, in front of him. And Harlan Rust, he begins, like the prosecutor told you, rehearsing, acting. This is a completely mundane, uneventful routine, and so everybody carries on. Nobody fathomed, imagined, foresaw any possible danger. They moved around Alec as he practiced his draw. As the prosecutor put it, working out the details of the move in the actor. Does it again, does it in a different way. Nobody bats an eye. And they will tell you that the investigation revealed that Baldwin was practicing drawing and pointing the weapon of the scene with guidance and instruction from Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza. The gun goes off. Everybody's shocked. Alec is startled. He immediately says, I didn't mean to shoot, I didn't pull the trigger. Immediately. What the hell just happened? They collectively exclaim. Shock turns to panic. 911 is called.
Bonanza Creek Ranch right now, we've had 2 people shot on a movie set accidentally. He said someone was shot. 2 people accidentally, gunshots as on a movie set, Bonanza Creek Ranch. I'll connect you with medical detectives on a movie set by a prop gun, bleeding help immediately. Okay. This AG that yelled at me at lunch asking about revisions. Did you see him when he yelled at my jet and yell at me?
With the prop gun, the AD, it was his responsibility. Not a word about Alec Baldwin. While they're en route, police, EMS, the cast and crew are outside, trying to figure out what happened, frantic, talking to those responsible for the prop and its safety. The armorer is yelling sorry, Hall's the first assistant director is panicked, the prop master, Sarah Zachary, I don't know exactly where she is at that, but they check the gun feverishly, they take the ammo out of the gun, they look at it, what the heck happened, they go back to the prop cart that houses the ammo, they're touching the gun and manipulating the gun, emptying it, they go and move some stuff off the prop cart, trying to figure it out. Sarah Zachary, the head of props, will tell you she threw some stuff out, and eventually, of course, EMS and police arrive pretty soon thereafter. And Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza, the director, are transported to the hospital where Helena tragically passes away. They don't secure the prop truck for several days, and then the prop house that supplies the truck, that supplies the cart, they don't secure for over a month. A lot of mistakes. They had never investigated it, and so they needed to figure out where the live bullet came from. They had the shell casing.
I saw people on Twitter saying this guy did terrible. I don't think this is too bad. He's just trying to hammer it home that his client's not responsible. I mean, he is showing a lot of evidence in opening statements, which usually isn't normal, but...
The one that was yesterday, the one that fired, we don't know, but all the other ones are proper.
I can pause this. I can turn this off. Move on. That was just a quick snapshot of the scene.
State didn't like him playing something.
Alec was doing his practicing, his rehearsing, his movements. People manipulate and point guns on movie sets. The gun went off during the rehearsal. No one saw him intentionally pull the trigger. It was obviously a tragic accident. He did not load it himself. He did not leave it unattended. He completed his costume and his character. It was an actor handling a prop and integrating it into the character of Harlan Rust. There was a dedicated professional there whose sole sacred responsibility was that prop safety. And Dave Halls, the head of safety, was there by her side. Everyone relied on that. And it was tragic that they let them down. He was just acting as he has done for generations, and it was the safety apparatus that failed them all. Even if he intentionally pulled the trigger like the prosecutor just demonstrated, that doesn't make him guilty of homicide. He did not know or have any reason to know that gun was loaded with a live bullet. That's the key. That live bullet is the key. That is the lethal element. But again, as the prosecutor told you, if they could prove that he intentionally pulled the trigger and he was imperfect, imprecise, wrong with what he said, then maybe you take that and you say he's lying. And if he's a liar, he committed homicide. And so what they do is they take the prop gun. They're blinded by the shot. They're blinded by trying to disprove Alec. They take it and they order a destructive test on the firearm. They order the FBI to take a test that they know will destroy the firearm. It's a pointless, unnecessary test where they blindly try to make this big case by taking a mallet and smashing the firearm. At the time that they did that, they knew that Alec had adamantly maintained, that he was manipulating the hammer and the gun just went off.
Dude, the chat is saying, worst defense lawyer ever. This lawyer's a joke. I don't think this is that bad.
That the witnesses said it went off out of nowhere. That there are these accidental discharges that happen on the set. That guns have issues in the real world. That this gun had a hair trigger. And the owner's manual of this specific gun actually says that if you load it with a live round or any round in the chamber, in that last position, and you drop it like you see a cowboy in a movie, this type of old cowboy gun can accidentally go off. I don't remember hearing anything about that. The evidence will show that. Why there was a live bullet on set, why the armorer placed it in the gun, and of course, why the head of safety failed to detect it. None of it speaks to whether Alec knew or should have known those things. He didn't. No one on that set did. This was anything other than foreseeable. And they must prove beyond any and all reasonable doubt that this was foreseeable. Total indifference to human life, that death might occur. So when they cry out justice, justice is truth. This was an unspeakable tragedy. Alec Baldwin committed no crime. Thank you.
I don't think that was that bad. People are over-exaggerating just because they hate Alec Baldwin a lot. Like, yes, Alec Baldwin is a douche and a hothead, but... So this is the detective on the case, I believe?
A call came in that there was someone shot at a movie set. Unclear who shot, how many were shot. I happen to be the closest person to the call.
So here's his body cam. But imagine it's going to be very chaotic.
You got your atomic kit? Yeah, I'm trying to get it out. This stupid new truck. Are we inside with the PDMs?
Officer LaFleur, tell us what's going on in the video right now.
I'm looking for my other medic bag. I handed the individual a trauma pack. for shooting.
Did you call for the helicopter, or did someone else do that? Do you know?
That individual said that they had already called one, but...
So obviously it's just chaos trying to aid to Miss Hutchins and Mr. Souza.
So it looks like more paramedics have arrived, and Lieutenant Benavides is right there.
What is your understanding about where Miss Hutchins is being taken now?
Into the back of the ambulance.
Can you explain why is she going into the back of an ambulance rather than the helicopter?
The helicopter hasn't arrived yet.
You guys want to see Vincent? Picking up the ETA on the bird. 32 Santa Fe, what's the ETA on the bird?
I asked them ETA on the helicopter and allow only certain people in and out, because at this point we didn't know what was going on. So.
Do you see this person here in the gray shirt?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that a first responder?
No.
When the crime scene tape goes up, what happens to that person?
I can't recall.
Prosecutors just trying to show the jury that they preserved the crime scene as much as they could with how chaotic it was and everyone there.
Just wanted everybody who was in the church in one area so we could easily be found.
You wanted everyone that was in the church in one area?
Yes, ma'am.
And are we looking at that area?
To the left of Baldwin is where majority of everybody was, yes.
Mr. Baldwin, how many people were in the room when it happened?
It's a crew.
It's a crew?
A dozen people.
That's Dave Halls, the first assistant director.
So just have you guys hang out for me right here?
Dave Halls actually took a plea deal, got probation for like, I think 6 months or something. Alec Baldwin at first was offered a plea deal, but then f***ed it up apparently by like talking too much and talking to witnesses or some shit. I don't remember what it was, but he was charged because obviously his job involved safety as well on set. The one that fired, we don't know, but all the other ones were prop bullets, I think he said.
Does it seem to you right now that they're talking about the incident?
It seems like they're talking about the gun that was used in the incident.
All right. Officer, do you know what this conversation is about that we're watching right here?
Something about a shake test. I don't know, maybe the rounds, dummy rounds maybe.
Okay.
I'm not too entirely sure.
Was Mr. Baldwin supposed to be talking about the incident?
No, ma'am.
Does he appear to be doing it anyway?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think it was based on the sound of how much ringing I had. I think it was a half.
Officer, are they still talking about the incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a reason that you didn't stop them since you told them not to?
I think as time goes on, I tell them to stop.
Officer LaFleur, does it look like Mr. Baldwin is speaking to a potential witness?
He looks like he's talking to the guy who says his name is one of the directors, yes.
Okay. Is that what you had in mind when you asked Mr. Baldwin not to speak to anyone?
No.
Do you know what they're talking about?
I couldn't hear what they were talking about. I did hear him ask him what cigarettes he was smoking and if he could have one.
Those f***ers were talking a lot when they were instructed not to.
At any point in time, did Mr. Baldwin tell you that he didn't pull the trigger of the gun?
I believe he told me he was holding the gun in the beginning when I was leaving the church. One of the guys said that Baldwin had pulled the trigger off of what was told.
And I know that this sounds ridiculous, but we have to follow some jurisdictional rules. Do you see Mr. Baldwin in this frame here?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you point him out, please? And do you see that same gentleman in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you point him out, please?
He's sitting in the middle with the glasses.
Okay.
All right, cross-examination on the detective. Here we go.
And in fact, he was very shocked, if you could picture Alec Baldwin in a pale state, very unsure of himself. You could say an actor out of character. Fair?
Sure.
Object to the former question. It is Mr. Spiro testifying in the question. Okay.
And he said to you, I'm here, whatever you want to do, right?
Yes.
He said to you at one point, where should I go? Right?
Yes.
And he also pointed out to you who the director was on scene who was hit in the shoulder, right?
I believe so. He asked, inquired about him.
And he also asked you how she was doing, right? Meaning Miss Hutchins, right?
Yes.
I don't remember you being asked about that at direct, were you?
And you being asked by the state?
Yeah.
Objection relevance?
So I want to take a step back. The dispatch that came over to your radio, sir, before you got to the scene was a dispatch for an accidental shooting by a prop gun, correct?
I believe that's what was told to me, yes.
Okay. And you've testified to that previously, right?
Yes.
I want to ask you, how come when you described it today in court, how come you didn't include the word accident when you testified before this jury?
I'm not one to say if it was an accident or not. Just there to initially respond to it, and then the detectives determine whether or not it was an accident.
Well, sure, but every other time you've been asked about this, you've said it was an accident. And now today at the trial of Alec Baldwin, when you're talking to this jury, you left that word out. Isn't that true?
Not intentionally, no.
So Spire's trying to show that he switched up his narrative here, but I don't really believe that the detective would do that intentionally, but who knows.
Meet with the prosecutors before you testified here today?
Just briefly in the room outside for them to tell me who was in order of what witness.
You've discussed your testimony previously with Ms. Morrissey, correct? Before today?
Just in a pre-trial interview, yes.
And you've said that based on your training and experience, you know that if witnesses are left to speak to each other, they can taint each other's memories, right?
Yes.
And sometimes that's incidental and accidental, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it's purposeful, right?
Depends on who's there, yes.
You had told Mr. Baldwin not to speak to the other witnesses. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And I think you were asked approximately 5 times why Mr. Baldwin was disobeying your orders. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
But in the lapel video that we just saw, you're not going up to Mr. Baldwin or these witnesses, but get out of here. Get out of here. I'm an officer. You got to separate. You don't do that, right?
Nope.
And also in that video, you can see a lot of these people are coming over to Mr. Baldwin, right?
Yes.
One of them comes over and shakes his hand, right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen that in all of your experience? Somebody commit a homicide, and everybody and all the witnesses are on the scene, circling around the person, shaking his hand and talking about what happened. Have you ever seen that in your entire career?
No.
That was a decent point, like showing the jury that obviously it's different, that it's a movie scene. It was clearly like some sort of an accident, but involuntary manslaughter, you don't have to be intentionally killing someone. It can be an accident. So the defense should focus on negligence. He wasn't being negligent. It wasn't part of his job, etc.
The way he was, his demeanor was that there wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say.
I wouldn't say there was no intention. I don't know the individual's intentions, but his demeanor was sad, upset.
Intention doesn't matter for manslaughter. It's an accidental killing. So I don't know what he's going for here.
Wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say. Isn't that true?
Again, the wording you're using, I wouldn't say I had any clue of whose intention was what, but he was sad and upset.
Wasn't any intention behind the act, as you could say, you know.
Again, I wouldn't say I knew what his intention was.
I understand that. What I'm asking you now, okay, is did you in fact say those words that I just asked you?
I may have.
Okay, you don't deny saying that?
No.
Defense is trying to impeach him on something he said, but they objected to something.
If you're reading the statement and it says my name next to it, then I more likely said it. I just don't recall when.
You spoke to a witness who told you that
what is Alec doing, bro? The jury is in the room. You can't be looking tired and stretching and shit. Sit up straight. Do you want to go to prison? Like, what is he doing, man?
You heard some language and then that he, the first assistant, was supposed to check the gun. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody on the 911 call mentioned Alec Baldwin at all?
No.
I asked you before we broke about a prior statement. I asked you if you made a prior statement that we talked about a few times. So I'm just going to approach quickly and refresh your recollection. November 30th, 2023, your pretrial interview, Officer LaFleur, and I'm just going to ask you to read down here.
Your Honor, and again, Mr. Spiro is testifying as he's handing it to the witness.
The state doesn't like him saying any extra commentary. They just keep saying he's testifying. He's not allowed to testify. Miss Morrissey ain't playing games.
Yes.
You made that statement, correct?
Yes.
Intent doesn't matter. Why is he... I guess it's good to get in front of the jury that there was no intent. For this manslaughter charge, it's all about negligence. And obviously being reckless and pointing a gun at someone. So, I mean...
Then really, in all fairness to Mr. Baldwin, he wasn't really disobeying police orders, was he, sir?
To an extent, yes.
I mean, if you're told not to talk and you talk to people, I don't understand. How is that not disobeying?
Do you know how the live bullet got on set?
I do not.
Do you know why the armorer loaded the live bullet into the popgun?
I do not.
Do you know why the first assistant director, head of safety, failed to detect it?
I do not.
I have no further questions for this.
Honestly, he didn't do the best. I'm starting to realize this case is going to be really hard to defend on cross. It's going to be really hard to show that there was no negligence and no recklessness involved in this when the guy pointed a gun at someone. Obviously, I really doubt Alec intended to kill anyone. Like, it was an accident. It was 100% an accident, in my opinion. That doesn't matter. Miss Morrissey recrossed. I'm sure this is going to be pretty interesting here.
Did I speak with you this morning about the testimony you were going to give?
No, ma'am.
See, he was hinting at that before, that he changed it from an accidental shooting just to a shooting, purposely in front of the jury.
Did Ms. Johnson speak to you this morning about the testimony you were going to give?
No, ma'am.
When was the last time someone from the prosecution spoke to you about the testimony you were going to give today?
I don't believe we've talked about the testimony I was going to give, but just about the pre-trial interview.
So you mentioned a pre-trial interview. So let me ask you, do you recall who was there?
Somebody from the defense and somebody from the state.
Someone from the defense?
It was a female.
Okay, so just to be clear, at your pretrial interview, it wasn't the state just speaking to you. The defense attorneys were there also, right?
Yes.
And they got to ask you almost all the questions, isn't that right?
Yes, if I can recall it.
Her attitude, I know she's like being a prosecutor and she's trying to get her point across, but there's something about her face that like...
So the prosecutors didn't ask you a single question?
Not that I can remember, no.
Do you agree with the defense attorney's assertion this morning that somehow you were coached to give your testimony?
I would object to that characterization, but he is.
Can you rephrase that question?
Did Mr. Spyro indicate to you on cross-examination did he attempt to imply that the prosecution had told you how to testify?
Essentially, it sounded like he asked if I was coached into my testimony.
But the prosecutors haven't actually told you what to testify to, have they?
No, ma'am.
About the statement that you made that it didn't seem like Mr. Baldwin intended to commit the act. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
Do you know what the crime that Mr. Baldwin is charged with?
I believe involuntary manslaughter.
Is involuntary manslaughter an intentional homicide?
No, ma'am. Not to my recollection of the Metro State statute.
Ooh, kind of destroying the defense here.
Are there criminal offenses that are intentional homicides?
Yes.
But that's not what Mr. Baldwin's charged with, right?
No.
Officer LaFleur, when you are speaking to a witness, when you were, in fact, speaking to witnesses at the scene, you collected their driver's licenses, didn't you?
Yes.
And
oh, he had to sneeze. I was like, what is he doing? What was that? This is a retired Lieutenant Benavidez. His testimony is important because he talked to the armorer who got sentenced.
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is the gun that Hannah Gutierrez, the armorer, handed to me.
Now, what did you do with this gun when she handed it to you?
I took custody of it from her, and I walked it over to the passenger side of my unit, my marked sheriff's unit.
What did you do with it once you walked over to the marked sheriff's unit?
I put it in the front seat, and I locked it.
So this is what Hannah had here. Loose ammunition everywhere.
What are we looking at? What was on the cart? What did you observe?
Loose ammunition, gun belts, a gun, various other items.
That's Hannah handing him the gun, I think. And he goes and puts it in his cruiser immediately. Defense cross-examination.
And you don't know whether anybody moved anything before you got there, right?
I do not.
Okay.
Why is he leaning back, bro? Sit up straight.
An empty prop gun without live ammunition isn't going to hurt anybody, fair?
I do not know, but...
Objection mischaracterizes the evidence.
I mean, other than if you drop the empty gun on your toe or something, an empty gun, a completely empty gun, isn't going to hurt anybody, true?
A complete, yeah, of course.
You know, and then you go back to the armorer, and she hands you the firearm, right?
Yes, they direct me to the armorer because I didn't know who the armorer was, and they directed me to her, and I asked her, "Is this the gun?" And she said yes.
And I can see you're wearing gloves as you're taking out the exhibit today. Right, you've got purple gloves on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't think you have to keep them on, by the way, if you don't want to keep them on.
I didn't know if you wanted to see the gun or not.
No, okay. I don't have to see it right now. But the reason I'm asking this is, and I don't think you talked about this in direct, but the day you took the gun, you weren't wearing gloves, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And but you were sort of careful when you took it, and you sort of you took it without touching the trigger. So if somebody wanted to swab the trigger for DNA, they still could. Fair?
The way I handled it was trying to be as safe as possible because I didn't have a holster for it. So I was trying to hold it so I didn't pull the trigger because I didn't know if it was empty or loaded or not.
And because you handled it that way, also somebody could have swabbed the trigger for DNA, right?
I guess so, yes.
Okay. Do you know if law enforcement ever swabbed the trigger for DNA?
I have no idea.
Not sure why that's relevant, to be honest. I mean, trying to cast doubt on the investigation a little bit, but...
Well, do you remember somebody telling you that the rounds were back at the cart?
I believe Hannah was talking to somebody and they directed it to that they were on the cart.
Yeah. Didn't the supervisors say that they believed this would likely be unfounded and it was probably an accident?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay and assumes facts not in evidence.
It's a proper question, obviously, because I'm asking why the backup didn't come in if he knows that.
Things are getting a little spicy. I mean, even if it was an accident, you got to prove there was no negligence and recklessness.
My personal involvement was just taking care of the evidence, and I don't know what happened after that.
So this lady just collected evidence at the scene. Pretty boring, to be honest. Doesn't really even impact the trial at all. So that's pretty much it for today, boys. The defense brought up intent, but that doesn't really matter. And it being an accident doesn't really matter. This is a manslaughter charge, so I don't know what he was going for with that. But yeah, hit subscribe. Love you guys. Peace out.